Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome here to our briefing. Our topic, as it announced, Syrian chemical dossier, independent view. And we have Maxim Grigoriev, director of the Foundation for the Study of Democracy, the Russian NGO, as the main speaker. Welcome, Mr. Grigoriev. And I'd like also to welcome Chargé d'Affaires of the Syrian Arab Republic, Mr. Monzar, and DPR of Russian mission to the UN, Vladimir Sofronkov, has the floor for welcoming remarks. Ambassador, please.
Thank you so much all for coming. I would like to express my gratitude to our expert, Maxim Grigoriev, who will be laying down our view on the topic. I just want to remind you, because last time, even during our deliberation in Security Council, people has inclination to forget a very important element of Syrian chemical demilitarization dimension. All this process of chemical demilitarization of Syria started in 2013 in Russian-American agreement in Geneva between Minister Lavrov and Secretary Kerry, then which took form of resolution 2118, which we consider a very unique historic achievement of collective efforts on chemical demilitarization of Syria. As a result of this unique process, 99% of chemical weapons of Syria were destroyed, and all remain subject should become a matter for technical discussions between Syrian government and OPCW. Then this positive trend was deviated somehow, and this dossier was used by some of our partners in achieving geopolitical goals and used against Syrian government. Many details we actually get across to you many times before. Chemical dossier, probably more than anything else, required very professional, specified approach by experts. There is no place for politicization of this crucial issue. So we have to be very specific, very professional. That's by that arguments was motivated our position last years on the subject, especially when we discussed JIM reports and other conclusions. So this issue requires very professional approach. And I hope that Mr. Grigoriev will lay down our view on that very important issue. You have the floor, sir.
Our organization, the Foundation for the Study of Democracy, analyzes extremist and terrorist ideologies across the world. We are the members of the Global Counterterrorism Research Network, established by the United Nations Counterterrorism Committee Executive Directorate. We were also granted consultative status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council. And we are the members of the Coordination Council for Counterterrorism of Civic Chamber under the lead of former Under-Secretary General of the United Nations, Sergei Ordzhonikidze. Our organization has carried out an independent assessment of the Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons report of the fact-finding mission regarding the incident of alleged use of toxic chemicals as a weapon in Douma, Syrian Arab Republic. We have interviewed 15 witnesses at the site of the incident in Douma. 40 members of the White Helmets, including those from Douma, who provided a detailed description of the methods commonly used by the organization to fake scenes. You will find more details in this book I am presenting to you today. More than 25 people who witnessed the white helmets staging the chemical attacks. We have also analyzed publications and videos related to the incident. For a start, I would like to draw your attention to paragraph 8.38 of the OPCW mission report. I'm going to quote. The team was taken to the tunnel that had appeared in videos and photographs showing bodies that were reportedly the result of the alleged chemical attack, together with victims of conventional bombing. Samples for analysis were collected in the tunnel following the sampling plan, but no chemical relevant to the allegation were found. End of quote. As you know, the white helmets were the ones who were actively engaging in the hospital incident and disseminated videos and information about victims in the hospital and the alleged use of chemical weapons by the Syrian army. On the screen, you can see footage from their video depicting members of the organization in the hospital. OPCW report concluded that there were no traces of chemical weapons at this location. That constitutes a direct accusation of the white helmets by OPCW in forging the incident and concludes that their witnesses are deceitful sources. We went to the hospital that was filmed by the white helmets in a video where its employees allegedly assisted those suffered from a chemical attack. The hospital personnel and Syrian civilians completely refuted those staged rescues. On the photo on the left, you can see our interview with a witness there too, Dr. Hassan. You can see his words on the screen. He told us, I quote, "Those who brought us those people told that they had chemical poisoning, but the medical examination revealed no signs of chemical poisoning. We provided them with elementary medical care and released them home." End of quote. Many witnesses of the events confirmed to us the hospital scene was staged and a fake. During our fact-checking mission in Syria, we found dozens of participants of the attacks staged by the white helmets. Those people told us in detail how they had to participate in the staging for few dollars to buy some food for their families. On the screen, you can see the photos of only some of them. For example, Rihab Ali Mansour narrates how she was taken to a flat and given white prayer clothes. She was then told to lay down and smear her mouth with toothpaste, playing dead in a chemical attack. It is symptomatic that we have seen a similar scene in the videos about the alleged incident in Duma. Yazan At-Tarazi narrates how he was taken to a medical center by the White Helmets members. They told him to close his eyes and filmed their movie. On the screen, you can see the words of Wafika Khubia, who tells us how she was brought by car to the city of Zamalka. Then she lay down on the staircase, performing death in a chemical attack. It is symptomatic that we have seen a similar scene in the videos about the alleged incident in Duma. At the bottom of the screen, you can see the words of witness Amar al-Mustafa ibn Muhammad from Aleppo, who saw with his own eyes how they simulated a chemical attack. They brought children, laid them down, pushed civilians away, and filmed children as if they died in the chemical attack. On the screen, you can see the words of the White Helmets member in Duma, Ahmed Bouvidani. He narrates how children performed suffering of a chemical attack. They were then given candies. This unequivocally proves that the White Helmets had staged chemical attacks even before the alleged incident in Duma. At the bottom of the screen, you can see the words of Aleppo citizen Abdurazak Nassan ibn Nauman, who said that he had personally seen the staged scenes of the White Helmets even before the alleged incident in Duma. Here is a further proof of the White Helmets staged scenes related to the chemical attack. Amran Makia, member of the White Helmets in Duma, I quote, "We were told that there were victims of the chemical attack and we should go there. We went there and saw nothing special, just a fire, but other White Helmets were taking pictures, filming everything, insisting that those were the consequences of a chemical attack," end of quote. This unequivocally proves that the White Helmets had staged chemical attacks even before the alleged incident in Duma. Aleppo citizen Muhammad al-Mustafa ibn Hassan says, "The White Helmets always disseminated information according to which the authorities had used chemical weapons. It was not true. In fact, we, as the inhabitants of that district, had never identified a single local child that had become victim of a chemical attack." This resonates to our survey of 15 witnesses in Duma who also were not capable to name a single local child who died in chemical weapons accident. I emphasize once again that any responsible journalist would not find it difficult to go to the Syrian regions, which were occupied by terrorists and in which the White Helmets worked, and find hundreds of witnesses and direct participants in the staged videos. The picture on the right, features a photo from the Time article. A photographer bears witnesses to a suspected chlorine attack in Syria. This article, with a reference to White Helmets members, accuses Syrian army of an attack with the use of chlorine. We found the White Helmets member in Duma, Mahmoud Bouvidani, from this photo and interviewed him exactly on the spot where the Time shot was made. He fully exposed their propaganda. You can see his words in the bottom of the screen saying, I quote, "We brought one family to the Duma hospital, representing things as if the Syrian army had used chlorine, but there was actually no gas. I was told to sit down on a bed and hold an oxygen mask on to get the required shot," end of quote. This also unequivocally proves that the White Helmets had staged chemical attacks even before the alleged incident in Duma. You have seen only few of many witnesses' reports indicating that fake chemical attacks were a permanent element of the White Helmets' work before the Duma incident. Detailed information in this book. As mentioned previously, the OPCW report established that the data provided by the White Helmets with regard to the incident at the hospital in Duma was a fake. As you all understand, if the source of information is deceitful from the very beginning, as was the case with the White Helmets with regard to the incident in Duma, the information from this source can further be used only by someone who is extremely naive or clearly interested in distorting the investigation results. It is obvious that an independent report would require characterizing such witnesses as deceitful sources and excluding the information received from them. Strangely enough, the PCW does the opposite and bases its report predominantly on this deceitful source. The report refers to the white helmets under the name of the Syrian civil defense, and the information provided them 20 times. 20 times. I stress that, 20 times. Such approach leaves no doubt both about the quality of the report and the PCW's willingness to discover the truth. In the middle of the screen, you can see a table of categories of people interviewed by the PCW mission. Unfortunately, the PCW fails to meet the criteria of transparency. On 13th February 2019, the BBC Syria producer Riam Dalati tweeted, "In fact, one of the 3 or 4 people filming the scene was Dr. Abu Bakr Hanan, a brute and shifty doctor affiliated with Jaish al-Islam. It seems reasonably to ask how many witnesses interviewed by the OPCW were affiliated with Jaish al-Islam and other illegal armed groups. Failure to present a list of witnesses tell us that the majority of the witnesses interviewed by the OPCW could be affiliated with illegal armed formations, interested in providing false information, or even people who were not present at the site of the incident. At the same time, the OPCW fails to include in the report the testimony of the witnesses whose presence at the site of the incident is confirmed by videos. For instance, OPCW interviewed only 6 people out of 17 witnesses present in The Hague at the press conference with 11-year-old Hassan Diab. The use of shady anonymous witnesses, along with the OPCW failure to include the testimony of confirmed witnesses in the report, raises questions about the conclusions of the report and the OPCW integrity. On the screen, you can see paragraph 8.29 of the OPCW report. It states, I quote, "The team analyzed the available material and consulted independent experts in mechanical engineering, ballistics, and metallurgy who utilize specialized computer modeling techniques to provide a qualified, competent assessment of the trajectory and damage to the cylinders found at location 2." End of quote. Under location 2, PCW understands the house with cylinder on the roof. This is practically the only information about the experts involved that is provided by the OPCW report. The OPCW withholds not only the names and qualification of the expert, but also the objectives and questions raised with them. It is evident that incorrect questions and incorrect conditions can lead to erroneous results, regardless of the qualifications of experts. It is only possible to assess the validity of the expertise if the questions raised with the experts are specified. Unfortunately, the PCW does not disclose the objectives and questions raised with the experts. This gives rise to reasonable doubts as to whether the experts were instructed to carry out a full analysis of all versions of the events. On the screen, you can see paragraph 8.67 of the PCW report. It states that the white helmets took the bodies to the place which were referred to as point 1 to, I quote, be prepared for burial, end of quote. It is evident that the autopsy would unequivocally confirm their claims about chlorine poisoning, as well as enable to identify the bodies and determine the death toll. There could be no other explanation for the apparent concealment by the white helmets of the bodies of the alleged victims of the chemical attack, other than the fact that they staged the attack using the bodies of the people who had died in other places, or even had been killed specifically for fake videos. The aim of the PCW mission, as specified in mandate 050/18, was to gather facts regarding the incident of alleged use of toxic chemicals as a weapon in Duma and to report to the Director General. On the screen, you can see an extract from the operational instructions for the PCW mission. The operational instructions for mission explicitly mention medical examinations and autopsies. The fact that OPCW didn't do it raises doubt with regard to both the quality of its work and its willingness to discover the truth. The PCW report mentions various numbers of casualties of the alleged chemical attack. On the screen, you can see paragraph 8.73 and 8.74 of the OPCW report. The numbers range from 70 to 500 people. This paragraph also cites the sources that deny the presence of chemically related casualties. It is evident that those data contradict each other and require an analysis to determine the veracity of those allegations. Then, the sources with false statements should be excluded from further consideration. It is also obvious that the data cited in paragraph 8.74 contradict the testimony referred to in paragraph 8.73. The OPCW failure to analyze the sources to determine their reliability, along with the subsequent use of deceitful sources, also raises doubts with regard to both the quality of the work of the OPCW and its willingness to discover the truth. On the screen, you can see the LEDs depicting positions of the bodies from the PCW report. It is evident that a competent study of the version with airdropped chlorine cylinders would require a list of casualties. In case of location 2, that involved a cylinder on the roof and 16 bodies in the videos, it would have been easy to make a preliminary list of casualties by questioning local residents and showing them photographs. On the other hand, the fact that the locals could not identify the victim on the photographs would support the version about a staged attack, for which the bodies had been specifically brought from other places. The OPCW report took almost a year to prepare. Despite the long period of time, the OPCW failed to question local residents. This indicates lack of competence of the organization or a deliberate attempt to conceal the facts confirming the version about a staged attack. On a separate point, during our interview with 15 witnesses in Duma, none of them could identify the locals that had allegedly fallen victims to the incident involving chemical weapons. Given that the residents of the Syrian cities tend to maintain close contacts, this raises strong doubts as to the veracity of the version about the poisoning of local residents and indirectly substantiates the version according to which the bodies of the victims had been brought separately. On the screen, you can see the diagrams from the PCW report. The fact that the mathematical model is not described raises questions. It remains unclear whether the air drag was taken into account, and if yes, what air density and at what height was used, as well as the drag coefficient of the cylinder. Those questions are of critical importance. Based on that, the results may differ up to 30 units. The speed before impact of 60 meters per second indicated in the diagram from the PCW report also raises doubts as to whatever the fact that the Syrian air forces fly at a height of more than 2,000 meters for fear of man-portable air defense system was taken into account. The speed of the cylinder near ground should have been more than 60 meters per second, indicated in the PCW report in both models, with and without air drag. Paragraph 8.31 of the PCW report states the following, I quote, "The analysis indicate that the damage observed on the cylinder found on the roof terrace, the balcony, the surrounding rooms, and the rooms underneath and the structure above is consistent with the creations of the aperture observed in the terrace by the cylinder found in that location." End of quote. As you can see, misperceptions led to false conclusions. On the screen, you can see that the cylinder allegedly dropped by the Syrian air forces didn't breach the roof of the building. The undisclosed model with the maximum speed near ground of 60 meters per second used by the anonymous OPCW experts did not account for all the necessary initial conditions. Drop height of 2,000 meters, drag coefficient, cylinder weight, and etc. Given those factors, the speed of the cylinders should have been much higher, leading to the cylinder breach the roof at location 2. The fact that this was not the case supports the version according to which the chlorine cylinder had been brought to stage the chemical attack. On the screen, you can see the paragraph 8.96 of the OPCW report. It makes a conclusion with regard to the situation at location 2 with the cylinder on the roof. Here's a direct quote. "The victims do not appear to have been in the midst of attempting self-extraction or respiratory protection when they collapsed, indicating a very rapid or instant onset. This type of rapid collapse is indicative of an agent capable of quickly killing or immobilizing." End of quote. However, the described situation with instant exposure and death of people is not indicative of chlorine, but a nerve agent. Broken windows in the building near the staircase would have brought the chlorine concentration down even more and reduced the risk of instant death for the victims. Studies of the incidents involving the release of chlorine show that in most cases people managed to evacuate. Besides, the number of injured significantly exceeds the number of casualties. The position of the bodies at the second and third floors and the staircase in the videos, as well as the fact that there were no confirmed victims of chlorine in the hospitals, are in direct contradiction to the OPCW version about the use of chlorine. Here's the key facts of our analysis. First, notwithstanding the fact that the OPCW report effectively exposed the falsity of the statements of the White Helmets about the events at Location 1 hospital, and despite multiple testimonies of the organization's practice to fake chemical attacks, the OPCW report is based almost entirely on their claims, with more than 20 references. Second, the OPCW uses a lot of questionable, anonymous, shady witnesses who are likely affiliated with armed groups and the White Helmets, and probably were not even present at the site of the incident, and fails to include in the report the testimonies provided by real witnesses. Third, the OPCW withholds the names of the experts it referred to, as well as the questions raised with them and the mathematical model they have used. All the factors considered at the situation in the house with cylinder on the roof refute the claims about the cylinder dropped by the Syrian air forces and support the version according to which the chlorine cylinders had been brought from outside. Fourth, the OPCW failed to do autopsies of the bodies of the alleged victims of the chemical attack, and the White Helmets arranged for their disposal. Fifth, the OPCW failed to identify and even estimate the death toll, which could have been easily done by questioning local residents. Sixth, the position of the bodies in the house with the cylinder on the roof contradicts the OPCW conclusion about the chlorine cylinder as a cause of death at that location. The above-mentioned facts refute the conclusions of the OPCW, according to which the chlorine cylinders could have been airdropped by the Syrian air forces, and the victims were exposed to chlorine they contained. The explanation that both the cylinders and the bodies had been brought in advance seems more plausible. Those facts also confirm that the OPCW has deliberately failed to conduct an impartial assessment of the incident in Duma and raise doubts as to whether the organization is capable of making such assessments in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Allow me at the outset to thank my distinguished colleagues in the permanent mission of Russian Federation who have planned and prepared this important event. Let me say here that we are proud of our partnership with the Russian Federation in countering terrorism and in the restoration of security, stability, and prosperity in Syria. Syria's commitment to eradicate weapons of mass destruction does not date back to 2013, the year we joined the Chemical Weapons Convention. On the contrary, our commitment to eradicate weapons of mass destruction is a long-standing one. I would like to remind all present here today that my country presented on 27 December 2003, when we were a member of the Security Council, a draft resolution to establish a zone free of all kinds of weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East. Nonetheless, at that time, the United States delegation threatened to veto if we put that proposal to vote. My country has honored its commitments pursuant to the Chemical Weapons Convention and Resolution 2118/2013. Syria has always endeavored to cooperate in a positive, transparent, and flexible way to uphold its commitments. even as we face tremendous challenges and difficulties, complicated and provocative security conditions resulting from the hostile actions of some regional and international stakeholders. The Syrian government made an unprecedented achievement in the organization's history by irreversibly eliminating its chemical weapons program in record time. Yet, instead of commending what the Syrian government has done, we observed manipulation of the international law by some Western states with the sole aim of advancing provocative and unfounded allegations against the Syrian government. Allow me to underscore the following facts in relation to the so-called Syrian chemical file. One, at the height of the terrorist war imposed on Syria, the Syrian government forces withdrew from important strategic locations, but they never used chemical weapons against the terrorist groups that had taken control there. Why and for what purpose would they use chlorine against civilians? Who would stand to gain? While such acts would only serve to tarnish the image of the Syrian state, hinder the progress of the Syrian Arab army, and marshal global public opinion against the Syrian government as a perpetrator, hence creating a pretext for well-known states to launch successive attacks against Syria. The witnesses who were alleged by the White Helmets to be victims of chemical attacks on Douma, went to The Hague and confirmed the fabrication of the attack by the White Helmets. And for your information, the three aggressors who orchestrated the fabrication, United States, France, and England, refused to attend the briefing and listen to the truth. The FFM has continuously violated its mandate and failed to uphold professional standards. It has adopted a selective approach in its investigations. It has not been transparent and did not maintain the chain of custody of samples. It conducts its investigations remotely. It did not comply with the fair geographical composition of its teams. All the FFM's assumptions were based on the same methodology, namely the fabrication of events and the use of such strange expressions as high degree of probability. The former OPCW United Nations Joint Investigative Mechanism took the same unprofessional approach when it investigated the use of chemical weapons in Syria. The words likely and unlikely appeared 32 times in its fourth report. However, scientific reports should not be based on assumptions when discussing scientific and legal evidence that should be based on only to certainty. Some states are turning a blind eye to more than 169 letters that my government addressed to the Secretary General, the Security Council, concerning the position and use by armed terrorist groups of chemical and toxic materials with the support and facilitation by well-known states, namely US, UK, France, and Turkey. Unfortunately, no action was taken by the UN to address those states. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now we have time for a small Q&A session. Please, you're welcome to ask questions. Thank you. I'm sorry, one small announcement that we'll have a translation from Russian into English on the English channel. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for convening this meeting, and I also would like to appreciate distinguished ambassadors of Russia and Syria for organizing this meeting. And I'm thankful to you, Maxim, for the great presentation. We are very in need of this kind of awareness-raising meetings here in New York, where we face with deception, fabrication, and disinformation in not in all, but in many cases. And the use of chemical weapons in Syria is one of those cases. Still, with the use of chemical weapons in Syria and Iraq, Iran is the main victim of chemical weapons in the contemporary history. And I will give you some examples only with respect to the use of chemical weapons in my country during the war by Saddam against us. And I'm quoting from the information of the United Nations Monitoring, Verification, and Inspection Commission, UNMOVIC. And it is not related to that time of war, and you know why. I will tell you. It has been released in 2006. It means 2 decades after use of chemical weapons against Iran. And according to the UNMOVIC's information, Iraq, during the 8-year war with Iran, I don't want to say Iraq, let's say Saddam, because even the Iraqis themselves were the victim of that war. They used 101,000 munitions of mustard gas, nerve agent, tabun, and sarin against Iranians. In 560 attacks, targeting not only the military personnel in the front lines, but also the villages and the cities, hospitals and schools. And the result was over 100,000 injuries. And 35 times of those attacks was directly against cities and villages. Only in one case, they bombed a city which is called Sardasht, and they killed 130 and injured over 5,000. And interestingly, at that time, we sent, as now the Syrian Arab Republic does, tens and tens of letters to the Security Council, to the Secretary General of the United Nations to do something, to investigate. And in certain cases, the Secretary General investigated and declared that chemical agents has been used by Saddam against Iranians. Even with that, no action was taken. But now, after 30 years, everything is clear. Even the Westerners tell you that when Saddam was developing its chemical weapons, he has been assisted by over 450 Western companies. It is clear now. But that time, instead of saying anything against Saddam or taking any action, even the slightest one, they were accusing Iran that Iran is using chemical weapons. And the clear case, which is interesting for all of you here, because now everything is clear and information has been declassified. In the case of Halabja, which Saddam used chemical agents against its own citizens and killed over 5,000 of people, the Department of State of this country, United States, sent an instruction to its own diplomats in different embassies around the world that in the face of any question with respect to the use of chemical agents in Halabja, you will tell that it is most probably used by Iranians. Therefore, I'm thankful to you for organizing this meeting and for giving this information. We are quite familiar with this type of disinformation and fabrications, which are being used, and we need it more. What I request you to hold such meetings in Geneva, in Vienna, and elsewhere. Wherever you can find the people to listen, please hold this kind of meetings and provide the information for them. When it comes to our country, as a victim of chemical weapons, this is my last point, we strongly condemn the use of chemical weapons anywhere by whomsoever. These weapons are inhuman, and no one should have it, and no one should use it. And the international community should be vigilant against the use and should bring those perpetrators to justice. But this should be done by a technical process. This should be done based on scientific methodology. It should be done based on scientific facts and figures, not with deception, fabrication, and politicization, as it has been done. And unfortunately, it is a damage to the CWC and OPCW itself. We are one of the members of that organization, and we are one of the countries that we were eager to actually conclude the negotiations of this convention at that time. And we are not comfortable with the situation that that convention and the organization is now. Therefore, we value your work, and we believe that we need this type of presentation everywhere. And again, I thank you, your organization, and also distinguished ambassadors of Russia and Syria. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And just my Iranian colleague's statement reminded me that, as a matter of fact, the history of chemical weapon use and WMD dossier in the Middle East is a very painful one. And I would like you to pay special attention to key phrase used by Maxim, which is misperception. And I would add to that, over-politicization lead to wrong conclusions. It's a very crucial observation. As a professional, I am actually far away from getting back to history. But we have to remember what high cost brought us technical mistake on Iraqi WMD. I'm saying that it cost us Iraqi statehood, which we, all of us now, trying to overcome for many years, in vain, by the way. then don't be bored, please, with our details here. We are here not to impose on you our view. We just want to share conclusions. Because as any details of any Middle East conflict, this dossier requires very professional international cooperation. So it relates to history, but it also relates to present, because investing so much time trying to crystallize who is wrong and who is right, we are running a real risk to let terrorists do their job. Now it's already around the world. I don't want to mention countries with so many victims. At a time when even Western intelligence community bring us to conclusion that terrorists already have a technology to produce a chemical weapon. So we have to be very careful. When JIM was created, by the way, don't forget that JIM was created by Russian Federation and United States, and at this time we told JIM leadership, you have a chance to rectify the image and reputation of international investigative bodies. In what sense? To make it professional, objective, impartial, purely technical. Results were, unfortunately, opposite, and we know the following events. So, idea is, in this context, thank you for Maxim for sharing. I hope you just will take into account that this alternative point of view, it's a way forward to launch a real cooperation, remembering the high cost of technical mistake leading to wrong, painful, and tragic political decisions. Thank you so much, and we are open for your questions.
Any other questions, please?
For everyone's awareness, I'm from the United States. I don't know where to begin with this briefing. Yesterday, we were in the Security Council, and in the light of the Security Council, we heard about the humanitarian situation in Syria. And today, in the basement, it's all flipped on its head. It's like we're in a bizarro world, but there's two versions of the truth at play here. One of them is that there's a regime that's known to have stockpiles of chemical weapons, and either independent leaders on the ground from the regime have chosen to use it, or an order was given through the chain of command, and it resulted in the killing of dozens of innocent civilians, including women and children, injuring over 500 people. The other version is that it was all an act, that it was all filmed, all the children were actors, people lugged chemical cylinders into their bedrooms and onto their roofs in order to make this happen. Now, when you're faced with these two versions of the truth, what do we as an international community do? We have to find what really happened. And we need to do that through an independent assessment. Now, I know, sir, that you posited that yours was an independent assessment, but I'd ask everyone here to ask themselves if it felt like there was an agenda here. Did it feel like the OPCW was getting harangued and that every conclusion that it made was being questioned? An independent assessment involves an independent actor. Now, if you listened, who is the OPCW? What is the fact-finding mission? What was the JIM? Was it established by the United States? Was it established by France? Was it established by Germany? No, it was established by us. We are the OPCW. I've got the list of members here, and it would take me 15 minutes to read through them all. I would wager that everyone in this room is a part of the OPCW. They came up with these conclusions. Now, if you question those conclusions, I would ask, how do we solve this problem? Here's how we solve the problem. You give unfettered access to anyone who needs to go into Syria to look at what really happened. That means journalists. That means scientists. That means anyone who's willing to go there and find out the truth. Is that what we're getting? Is that what we're getting from the regime? No, it's not. They're not letting people in. They're only letting people in if it furthers their own ability to consolidate their power. I just want everyone in this room to be aware of that. This is what we're hearing. This is propaganda. And we should all know it. Thank you.
Я, наверное,
I believe I'm going to answer in Russian. As far as I understand, we're having interpretation, right? Well, when I see a speaker from American side, I recollect classic examples. For example, Iranian delegation shows a photograph of Colin Powell, who made a speech in the Security Council with a vial sample of chemical weapon, and at that time apparently it was a lie and it was a propaganda. Now American experts and the American government recognized that it was an apparent lie and propaganda. When there was a speech in the Security Council of a girl who told that she personally saw Iraqi soldiers to throw children away from incubators and to kill 300 people, this was an apparent lie and propaganda. Such examples of behavior by the US side here in the United Nations, there are dozens of them. I would also like to call the US side to study the facts before giving assessments. Well, before assessing this book, just try to read it. I believe it would be correct. There are more than 100 testimonies listed in this book, including precise testimonies of people saying that among the white helmets financed by the US government, there were many terrorists among those white helmets who killed people, who participated in military operations, including together with ISIS. Here are proofs of white helmets performing nearly all the tasks to fortify the armed positions of terrorist groups. There are proofs that the white helmets as an organization committed robberies, and the victims were women who were robbed of their jewels. I mean, women who were shelled at, and the dead bodies of women who had been killed. Probably you will be interested to read testimonies of dozens of people who say, as in particular in Aleppo, women and children got lost when white helmets took them allegedly to take medical care of them, to get them back void of any internal organs of their bodies. For us, it is evident that the white helmets was a key element of a legal system of removal of organs of human body. I believe the US side would be interested to read this before making such statements and such assessments. As for the report in question, here we presented understandable and evident requirements towards any report. In this case, I mean, it was the report by OPCW. We saw no required information that was needed in order to assess this report. The report based on testimonies of questionable witnesses. It used incorrect information and incorrect assessments that lead to incorrect data. This report almost entirely is built on the basis of sources that cannot be considered credible, and what is most important, this report contradicts to itself. I provided specific paragraphs which are contradictory to one another, especially in what regards the situation with what they call location 2, where the bodies that were found there and the conclusions of OPCW show that against those people, that it was not chlorine that had been used against those people, as other parts of the report say. That's why I'd like to advise the US side to have a closer look at our report and to study this book in greater detail, which contains testimonies about the white helmets. If we are talking about propaganda examples, well, trust me, we can find multiple dozens of examples of American propaganda even in this hall now, including the examples that the US side actually acknowledged already. Thank you for your question.
Interactive discussions. Frankly speaking, this briefing was conceived not to provoke hyper-emotional reaction. This briefing was conceived as a forum to share with you Russian view on what's going on with chemical dossier. Professional approach requires to take into account, to analyze, and to present counter-arguments. It's exactly what the idea of Maxim coming to New York and brief us. Seems to me that this professional exchange of alternative points of view could open the way for professional findings on chemical weapon dossier in Syria. Another point my American colleague mentioned, the GIM was established by all of us. That's right. Initiated by Russia and the United States, then endorsed by Security Council. That's right. But the methodology used by this structure, unfortunately, undermined all conceivable criteria of professional investigations. Again, our view, or conceivable contagion. Even, as I mentioned many times in our deliberation in Security Council, undermined the golden standard of Western investigation process, which is presumption of innocence. Imagine the situation when policemen come into any US court presenting the case, and court-martial asks him whether, sir, you visited the crime scene. If he says no, imagine the reaction of the court. I did not visit a crime scene. The same here. It's all our reproaches to methodology process. Remote investigation, no visiting crime scenes, very problematic witnesses. So again, our view. Then about, and my expert just sent me a message, he's right, FFM and Syria, it's a bilateral mechanism between Syrian government and OPCW technical secretariat. That's important. It's a bilateral understanding. So I don't want to get to this more deliberation, explanation mode. So please, your questions.
Ambassador.
Thank you very much. What I want to say is that what we have heard from our American colleague that we are diplomats, my colleague, and we should abide to the rules of procedures and to the principles of this organization. So I don't know why we should pave away from that. We are not a regime. We are not a government of the Syrian Arab Republic, and we are the delegation of the Syrian Arab Republic, so we should respect each other. I do not call you the representative of the American regime. So this is one point. The second point I want to talk about is the reality of fabrication. And I will also go to examples. All the propagandas we heard in Aleppo, for example, about the child Umran. Everybody knows the child Umran, who was said that he was bombarded by the government of the Syrian Arab Republic and he was wounded. And when the eastern part of Aleppo liberated by the Syrian army, we discovered that Umran is a healthy boy, healthy child, and he came to the television with his father and he told the story that it was all faked by the white helmets. So there was no attack and there was no injury for this child. The second one is in Douma also, when the Syrian government was accused by some countries that it used chemical weapons on Douma. Actually, what happened is the same as the story of Imran. We have the story of the child whose name is Hassan Diab. He is 11 years old. He was called by the white helmets from his home, from his house, and they took him to the hospital where they fabricated this play. And after that, with the help and initiatives of our friends in the Russian Federation, all the witnesses in Douma, all the witnesses, the alleged witnesses, the alleged injured by chemical attack, they were taken from Damascus to The Hague in order to brief the reality of what happened. And in The Hague, they said that all the story is a fabricated one. It is not real. It is fabricated by the white helmets. One last point I want to raise. We know all that the United States is the only state party in the Chemical Weapons Convention who refuses till today the destruction of their chemical weapon arsenal. Can the representative of the US tell us why, explain why? Until today, also, the US administration keeps on sending experts in chemical warfare to train terrorists on how to use it and mix toxic chemical materials in the neighboring countries and inside Syria. Thank you.
Further questions, Ali, and then TASS representative.
My name is Ali Barada. I'm a journalist with France 24 and Al-Sharq Al-Awsat newspaper. My question is whether by this briefing you're trying to discredit and undermine the integrity of the OPCW. And my second question is that the OPCW has been saying that they wanted the Syrian government to cooperate more regarding the so-called unannounced chemical agents that they still have. And I have a piece of information, and I want you to answer that the OPCW experts asked to exhume the bodies in Douma, and the Syrian government and the military police from Russia refused this request by the OPCW expert. Thank you so much.
Давайте, наверное,
Let's start from the first point. The first question, if I understand it correctly, is addressed to me. As for the behavior of the Syrian government, I believe the Syrian representative would answer that. The task of this briefing is to consider the evident problems in preparing reports by OPCW. Those problems are listed here. It is self-evident that the report presented by the organization in this case does not comply with minimal standards. It is evident that if one part of the document says for sure that this source gives deceitful information, well, this then goes without saying that this very source cannot be referred to further on, and that the remaining part of the report cannot be based on statements and testimonies provided by this source. Well, I believe these are evident things that are evident for any pupil at school. The methods that were used when preparing this report, the incorrect conclusions that were presented, they also do not comply with what OPCW used before, and it does not correspond to the high standards set by this organization. This is the first report that I can recall, the first report by OPCW that is prepared in so poor and bad manner. I mean, the data is tackled incorrectly. It does not follow the logics, and the conclusions of the report do not correspond to the essence of the report. All of this raises questions as to whether OPCW is capable of providing independent assessments. This is the issue we are bothered about. We do not try to say that the OPCW is, well, a bad organization. It is not so. We just try to draw your attention to some evident points that show that this concrete report has been poorly prepared, that it lacks in logics. And we only draw your attention to the two issues that say that the conclusions of the report do not correspond to the essence of the report. First is the question about the cylinder. When taking into account all the details and using the correct mathematical model, taking into account that the Syrian Air Force flies at the height of over 2,000 meters, so when it dropped the cylinder, this cylinder would have damaged the roof. It would have broken the roof, which it did not. It means this cylinder was not airdropped. It was delivered by some other means. And there are many examples of this. We have witnesses who say that those falsifications were staged. We have dozens of witnesses saying so who had to participate in it, including witnesses from Duma. This book, I urge you to read it. It contains concrete examples of how those falsifications were organized in Duma, and the former members of White Helmets tell about it. And secondly, it's evident for any expert that the use of chlorine could not lead to instantaneous death of that many people who were located at various floors and in the rooms that had windows open. You can, well, read it in any specialized literature. When there is a leak of chlorine, not that many people get killed instantaneously. People require urgent medical assistance and care, that's true, but they do not die on the spot. It also contradicts to other parts of the report by OPCW and proves the version the theory that the dead bodies must have been transported from some other locations. That's what we're talking about. And we suggest discussing concrete facts, and we urge the OPCW to first publish the list of witnesses they interviewed so that we could understand whether there were representatives of illegal armed formations among them. Are there people who are affiliated with Jaish al-Islam who are interested to spread the wrong information or not? This is interesting. We need this list in order to understand whether those people were present at the location of the incident, because there is proof that there were some people who had nothing to do with the incident and who were not at the spot at the time. So we need this list in order to study and to assess it. We need the list of experts. We need the list of questions that was set in front of them. We need the mathematical model that they used. Why did they use the speed of the fall 60 meters per second? Where does this information come from? Our experts say that this mathematical model was not correct. I'd like to say once again that I saw this data that dependent on the coefficient, dependent on the drag coefficient that was used for the cylinder or for another thing, the result may differ up to 30 times. That is why we need the model that the experts used. And finally, we need to have an opportunity to assess the situation related to the spread of chlorine in order to see whether the spread of chlorine could have possibly led to the death of that many people who were located at different levels of a building. Our experts say that they couldn't. This is what we're talking about. And as for the other questions, I believe the Syrian representative will answer them better.
Of course, we have got rid of all of our chemical weapons, as everybody knows. And all these weapons were destroyed on an American vessel, I think Cape Ray, and in some European countries. So, and we have announced time and again that we have no chemical weapons anymore. We have disposed of it forever, once and forever. And we are here just to clarify the facts. And for my colleague, you can, regarding Duma, you can go back to the reply of the Syrian government, the official reply of the Syrian government, which was issued in the document S/2019/221. So you can go back to this document and you will see what the reply of your question regarding this matter.
I'd like also to draw your attention to the fact that all the documents by OPCW do not mention the use of chemical weapons by Syria. They speak about the use of chemical agents. More than that, the OPCW analysis does not say that the assault chemical agents were used, or that some type of chlorine which was specifically meant to be used as a toxic agent was used. As far as I understand, it speaks about the use of general type of chlorine, industrial chlorine. As far as you understand, any organization can get access to this type of chlorine without any significant impediments. By saying so, I urge everybody to use the correct terminology. We should not be mistaken when using the term chemical weapons, even OPCW says that it is not about chemical weapons. This term is used in order to manipulate the situation. We can here only speak about the agents that were used as chemical weapons. But, well, it is quite understandable. A question would arise if Syria is accused of possessing chemical weapons, then why does Syria use industrial chlorine for those attacks? Not chemical weapons, but just industrial chlorine. This is another contradiction between facts presented and reality.
From our friend, wrong question always provoke a right answer. We are not here to discredit anyone. Wrong question. We are part of OPCW. But look at history. Any scientific conclusion, right scientific conclusion, has always been built on controversial professional assessments. We are here to present our view on what's going on. Thank you so much.
As my American colleague said, he is overwhelmed. I'm also overwhelmed. First, I would like to thank you for this briefing.
Push the button, please.
From the left.
Yeah.
I would like to thank you for this briefing. I several years ago stopped studying the Syrian situation, but I was fascinated at the Security Council by the UK delegation's obsession with the Skripals, and I did publish something to the effect that 80 British citizens died in the Grenfell fire, but the British, boasted of spending 5,000 hours investigating the death of the Skripals. Well, actually, the Skripals never died. It was two guinea pigs and a cat. So that was basically a non-issue, but it was the attention given to this non-death was astounding because the British have many people dying of poverty. But I would like to also respond to my American colleague, and I am an American patriot, and you used the word propaganda, and I would like to know whether you ever read the Pentagon Papers, which I did, and they contain the information that was denied to the American people, who were led into a war in which many Americans were killed, also based upon a lie, which was the Tonkin Bay resolution, so that without the approval of Congress, the United States was for years embarked in a war which killed many Americans, millions of Vietnamese, to whom the media often referred as gooks. And I was present with an anti-war movement of enormous proportions in the United States that was participated in by American citizens who were furious that a war was being conducted without their agreement. Now, for a government to do that against the will of the American people and based upon the withholding of information, which was all in the Pentagon Papers, and it was known by at least 5 administrations that this war was unjustified. This is a dictatorship. When the people in a country are denied information and sent off to die for a war that everybody knows is not, everybody in the government knows is not necessary, this is dictatorship. And I'm raising this because the latest way of demonizing a government is to call it a dictatorship. And we were involved in, and again, this was covered up, in destabilizing a democratically elected government in Chile. And when an American citizen, a graduate of Harvard, Exeter, found out by chance that the US was deeply involved in destabilizing and overthrowing a democratically elected government, he was murdered. And the evidence is that the US government was involved in ordering his murder to cover up what we were doing, which was illegal. And I am speaking as a patriotic American. I want to be proud of my country. And I want my country to act honorably and not as a bully, but in the case of Vietnam, as murderers. And so I am replying to you and also saying that the use of the word propaganda, I think it's necessary to look into the mirror because we use it quite a bit, as do the British, and I'm sorry to say the French. That wasn't a question. My question actually was originally intended to be whether you think that the Security Council and the UK obsession with the Skripals and the use of chemical poisoning there was intended to be a justification of accusing Syria of using chemical weapons. I got a bit off subject because I was very concerned about a very emotional statement made by a country person of my own. But my original question was about the Skripals and the obsession with them, and whether you think that that was intended as a way of proving that chemical weapons were used, well, in this case it was by Russia, but the implication being Syria.
Carla?
Do you think that the Skripals case, in which they didn't die, was intended to build an atmosphere or an environment in which it would be perceived or misperceived or fabricated that Syria was using chemical weapons? In this case, the accusation was against the Russians, but the Russians are accused of everything. Our country is now falling apart, and we're blaming the Russians and taking no responsibility for our own weaknesses and faults. So the Skripals, they're alive and well. 2 guinea pigs are dead, a cat is dead. But do you think that the incredible amount of attention given to their non-death was an attempt to create an atmosphere? I believe the term is sheep dipping, to create, and that was used in an analysis of the Kennedy assassination here.
Thank you, Carla.
Just as any person who's able to analyze information, read press statements, I have much to tell about this situation, about this case, and just like any other person who's able to analyze what comes in, I'm facing many questions to the version presented by the US and by British side. I mean the number of illogical conclusions that are contained in the version that they promote, and this lack of logics cannot but raise questions, and I'm ready to speak about it, but it is another topic that we highlight today, so I believe we'd better remain in the framework of our theme for today.
So,
Thank you very much. Actually, mine is not a question, an intervention rather. And I waited to the end, not to just hijack the environment here for discussions. Thank you very much for the information that you provided. My name is Mevlüt Yakut. I'm from the Turkish delegation. And since the Syrian regime representative made a reference to my country, I deem it necessary to make a few remarks. The regime representative mentioned of some letters, more than 169 letters. We all know the content of those letters, very well known. The hallucinatory allegations of the regime are nothing but futile efforts aimed at distorting the stark reality regarding the atrocities committed by the regime that amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. The Syrian regime has lost its legitimacy long ago. We therefore do not deem the mentioned letters of the regime as credible. It has a well-documented and ever-growing record of use of chemical weapons against its obligations emanating from international agreements and conventions to which it is party. In fact, the regime is the very root cause of all the problems emanating from the Syrian conflict and will be held accountable. We have no lessons to learn from the representative of a regime which has used multiple times chemical weapons against its own people. That said, Turkey will continue to be in full solidarity with the Syrian people who are the victims of the war crimes of the regime. Thank you very much.
No, thank you so much for all, and Turkish delegate as well. Just to shed light on something what's going on in on a real professional field. Now we are getting ready for already 12 Astana Garanters meeting, which will take part tomorrow with participation of our Turkish partners, Iranian partners. We always used to and now still inviting the United States representative to come over and join us to make discussion more productive, etc., etc. And we, of course, tomorrow inviting to Nur Sultan representatives of Syrian government and Syrian opposition, which is the main value of this format. And we will be discussing based on a kind contribution, both political and logistical by government of Kazakhstan, real exit strategy from Syrian crisis. I just want to tell something to sum up on a very positive, on a more positive note. No, I mean, dear colleagues, the Syrian conflict is any conflict in crisis. Its genesis, its history is a very troublesome and, of course, very painful, first of all, for Syrian people. But I am sure, based on our experience here in New York, working on many conflicts, all of us, and I would say all P5, we are working to keep strong Syrian statehood, because we understand what does it mean based on Libya, Yemen, other countries. We all well aware what does it mean to lose state institutions. That's why this understanding actually make my vision more positive. And now we keep proposing, I guess, we will get upper hand finally, that we could unite, never late, to unite our efforts, to get in cooperation with parties involved, to work together on chemical weapon, to find the truth finally in our controversial assessments, which is a very part of scientific elaboration. And we have, of course, different layers, but at the same time, we have channels, we have contacts, we have dialogue. So the picture is not so blurry. So we just, we have a temptation, inclination to see as, according to bureaucratic language, to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And thank you so much for your very, very active participation in our event. And Mr. Grigoriev, if you want to just say something on that.
Очень кратко скажу, вот последний.
I will be brief, give a short comment on the latest statement. As far as I understand, it was more of a statement rather than question. As far as I understand, these were rather American ideas than Turkish ideas, so I see that your position coincides with the position of the United States. I believe that it was probably also so with the previous statement, because the lady who was speaking before just assessed the current American regime as a dictatorship, though she is an American citizen. Well, in any case, I'm not going to comment on those assessments. As far as I understand, we're adjourning this meeting because there seem to be no further questions. Let me thank all of you for coming. On behalf of my NGO, thank you for your participation, and I would call upon you to try and give your own assessments to the fact that you encounter.
Opening of the exhibition for the later time, and you will send you a further. We'll send you further the invitation for that event. Ambassador.
Thank you. As we said, we are here to clarify reality. We don't want to go into side things, side talks. But as my colleague, the Turkish representative, spoke, so I want just to tell him, in Arabic we have a proverb, a say, says that the one whose house is made of glass does not throw stones on people. This is a very important thing. Turkey is involved in the Syrian crisis since the 0 hour, since the beginning. You opened the borders. I don't want to go into details. There are a lot of details, beginning from the cars which were seized by the Turkish customs and Turkish police in Adana, and they were all of them. They were taken to court, and with them also you have taken the judges, and there are a lot of things. You have used the Turkish soil were used to train the terrorists who were sent to Syria. All the terrorists who came into Syria came through your borders. I don't want to talk too much, but the proverb is very important for you. Thank you.
So, thank you, folks.